The Boy Who Changed a Tire and a Life. Matthew Evans, a wealthy man in his late 70s, sat alone in his sleek silver Mercedes, rhythmically tapping his thumb against the steering wheel. The hum of the air conditioner did little to fight off the heavy Kentucky heat that pressed against the car windows like a living thing. Once a titan in the world of finance, Matthew was now long retired, used to comfort, control, and things going his way. But today was different. Today, he found himself stranded on the side of a remote country road, miles from his sprawling mansion on the outskirts of town, with a flat tire and no cell signal. He had tried calling roadside assistance several times, but the calls kept dropping. Sighing deeply, he resigned himself to wait. Frustration was bubbling up when he noticed a figure walking toward him down the road. A young boy, maybe 13 or 14, wearing a faded t-shirt and scuffed sneakers. The boy approached with quiet determination, his eyes narrowing slightly as he studied the vehicle. When he reached the car, he gave Matthew a respectful nod and said, "Got a flat, sir?" "Yes. Yes, I do," Matthew replied, unsure why he felt both relieved and oddly unsettled by the boy's presence. "I was hoping to call for help, but there's no signal out here." The boy smiled faintly. "I can help with that," he said, kneeling down beside the tire without hesitation. "My grandpa taught me how to change one last summer. Do you have a spare?" Matthew pointed toward the trunk, watching in silence as the boy pulled out the jack and tools with practiced hands. There was something almost calming about the way he worked, focused, confident, and quiet. For a moment, Matthew felt something he hadn't in years: humility. He thought about offering the boy some money up front, but the kid didn't even glance his way. He was too focused on the task. Within minutes, the job was done. The boy wiped his hands on his jeans and stood up, offering a small, satisfied smile. "All done," he said simply. Matthew reached for his wallet, pulling out a few bills. "Here, take this. I really appreciate your help." But the boy stepped back, raising a hand politely. "Thank you, sir, but I don't need anything. Just happy to help." And with that, he turned and walked away, leaving Matthew standing there with the money still in his hand, stunned. He got back into his car, but as he pulled back onto the road, he couldn't stop glancing in the rearview mirror, watching the boy's figure grow smaller in the distance. The rest of the drive, his thoughts kept circling back to that simple act of kindness. That boy didn't ask for anything. He didn't expect thanks. He helped because it was the right thing to do. That night, Matthew sat alone in the study of his grand home. Surrounded by shelves of books he never read and artwork worth more than most people's yearly income, he found himself oddly restless. His dinner, steak and asparagus, cooked to perfection, sat untouched. All he could think about was that boy. In his decades of business, Matthew had dealt with thousands of people: partners, clients, employees. Every interaction was a transaction. There was always a price, a catch, a favor owed. But not this time. This boy, this stranger, had done something Matthew couldn't quite understand. He gave without expecting anything in return. The boy didn't have much. His clothes were faded, his hands were dusty, and yet he carried himself with a quiet dignity that money couldn't buy. That night, Matthew couldn't sleep. Something about the encounter gnawed at him. Gratitude, maybe, or guilt, or a strange, newfound curiosity. The next morning, he found himself back on that same stretch of road, scanning the horizon like a man chasing a ghost. He stopped at gas stations and roadside diners, asking about a boy who matched the description. Most people shrugged, until finally a kind-faced older woman behind the counter of a small cafe said, "Sounds like you're talking about Elijah. That boy's always helping folks. Lives with his mama over in Harlan." "Harlan," Matthew repeated, filing the name away. He thanked her and headed off. The town of Harlan sat nestled in the foothills of the Appalachians, picturesque, quiet, and untouched by the chaos of the outside world. But Matthew barely noticed the scenery. His mind was spinning with questions. Who was this boy? What kind of family raised someone like that? After asking around, he was eventually pointed to a modest house on the edge of town. The porch sagged a bit, and the paint was peeling, but it was tidy, lived in, real. Matthew parked and hesitated. What was he even going to say? He didn't know, but still he knocked. The door opened to reveal a woman in her early 40s. She looked tired, but kind. There was a sharpness in her eyes as she sized him up. "Can I help you?" she asked. "Good morning," Matthew said, clearing his throat. "I'm sorry to bother you. I believe I met your son yesterday. Elijah? He helped me with a flat tire." Her face softened. "That sounds like my Elijah," she said with a smile. "He's always helping folks." "I wanted to thank him properly," Matthew said. "He wouldn't take anything from me yesterday." She stepped aside, waving him in. "He's out back. You're welcome to wait." Matthew entered the small home, taking in the humble surroundings, worn furniture, family photos, and crayon drawings on the wall. It was nothing like his grand estate, and yet something about it felt warmer, more honest. Out back, Elijah was mending the fence. When he looked up and saw Matthew, his face lit up with quiet surprise. "Hey, mister," he said, wiping his hands on his jeans. "What are you doing here?" Matthew smiled, feeling something unfamiliar stir inside him. Nervousness, maybe, or respect. "I came to thank you again," he said. "You helped me more than you know." "When I really needed help," Matthew said quietly, "you were there. And I haven't been able to stop thinking about that moment since." Elijah gave a small shrug, his expression open and sincere. It wasn't a big deal, but to Matthew it was. He looked at the boy, leaning casually against the fence, the sun catching in his hair, calm as ever. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Matthew felt strangely out of place, like a guest in someone else's life. And for the first time in a long while, he was the one being sized up. Not as a wealthy man, but simply as a person. "I don't think you understand how rare that is," Matthew finally said, breaking the silence. "People don't usually help strangers without expecting something in return." Elijah tilted his head, genuinely puzzled. "I don't see it that way. If someone needs help and I can do something about it, why wouldn't I?" Simple, honest, undeniably clear. The kind of wisdom Matthew hadn't heard in decades. He glanced around the yard. The fence was patched with uneven boards. The grass was worn thin in places. An old swing set stood in the back, rusted and leaning, like a memory clinging to the present. This family clearly didn't have much, yet somehow there was a sense of peace here, a quiet kind of pride that money couldn't buy. "You've got a good head on your shoulders," Matthew said, his voice softer. "Your mother must be proud." Elijah smiled and glanced toward the house. "She works hard. I just try to help out where I can." That hit Matthew deeper than he expected. He thought of his own parents, of their modest beginnings. They'd taught him about grit, sacrifice, and honesty. But somewhere along the way, lost in boardrooms and bank accounts, he'd forgotten those lessons. "I'd like to do something for you and your family," he said finally. Elijah straightened, a flicker of wariness crossing his face. "We're okay, mister. We don't need anything." "It's not about need," Matthew replied. "It's about what's right. You helped me, and I want to return the favor." Before Elijah could respond, his mother stepped out onto the porch, drying her hands on a dish towel. "Elijah, come in and wash up. Lunch is ready," she called, then looked to Matthew. "Would you care to join us? It's nothing fancy, but you're more than welcome." The offer caught him off guard. He wasn't used to such genuine hospitality. No strings, no expectations, just kindness. "I'd like that," he said, surprised by how much he meant it. Inside, the home was modest but full of life. The kitchen smelled of fresh bread and roasted vegetables. The mismatched chairs around the table had been carefully arranged. Elijah washed his hands and joined them with the same unbothered charm he'd shown since they met. As they ate, Matthew found himself engaged, not out of politeness, but genuine interest. Elijah spoke animatedly about school, his dreams of becoming an engineer, and his love for building things. His mother chimed in with stories about their community, neighbors helping neighbors, and a pride that ran deeper than their worn floorboards. It wasn't just a meal, it was a reminder of everything he'd once known and forgotten. After they finished, as the table was cleared and laughter still lingered in the air, Matthew turned to Elijah's mother. "You've done a remarkable job raising him," he said. "He's got more heart than most people I know." Her eyes softened, glistening just slightly. "Thank you. He is a good boy." We've had our share of struggles, but we've learned to appreciate the small things. Matthew nodded slowly. Inside, something shifted. This family had given him something without even realizing it. A renewed sense of purpose. Not in dollars or deals, but in decency, humility, and grace. He left their home that afternoon feeling lighter than he had in years. But he also knew he couldn't walk away and do nothing. This wasn't about charity. It was about gratitude and doing what was right. The next morning, Matthew got to work. He called in favors from old business partners, contractors, suppliers. Within hours, a plan was in motion. And within a week, trucks began to arrive at Elijah's house, unloading lumber, paint, tools, and more. Matthew stood at the curb, clipboard in hand, directing the crews like he had in the boardroom so many times before. But this time, it meant something. Elijah and his mother stood on the porch, eyes wide with disbelief. "You didn't have to do this," she said, her voice trembling. "We've managed fine on our own." Matthew turned to her, his gaze sincere. "You've done more than manage. You've thrived. And now it's my turn to help." "You gave me something I didn't even know I was missing," Matthew said, his voice low but sincere. "Let me give something back." Elijah stood quietly beside his mother, eyes thoughtful, a rare stillness settling over him. Matthew knelt slightly so they were eye to eye. "You taught me something important, Elijah," he continued. "Helping people isn't about money. It's about showing up. I want to show up for you." What followed over the next several weeks was nothing short of a transformation. The sagging front porch was torn down and rebuilt with strong, polished wood. The leaking roof was repaired. The rusty old swing set out back, its chains long broken, was replaced with a brand new one that gleamed in the sunlight. Inside, the walls were freshly painted, the floors sanded and polished until they shined. The small kitchen now boasted modern appliances, carefully chosen to make daily life just a little easier. Elijah, ever eager, tried to help with the work, carrying planks, sweeping dust, anything to be part of the process. But Matthew would chuckle and wave him off. "Your job," he said gently, "is to enjoy being a kid for a little while." Still, Elijah couldn't help but hover nearby, watching the crew intently as they measured, sawed, and hammered. His eyes lit up with curiosity. One of the workers, a large, good-natured man named Joe, noticed the boy's interest and invited him to help measure wood. That one small gesture opened the door. Before long, Elijah was asking about tools, materials, and blueprints, his enthusiasm as bright as the fresh paint on the walls. From a distance, Matthew watched it all unfold. A warmth bloomed in his chest, something beyond pride, deeper than satisfaction. For the first time in years, he felt like he was doing something that truly mattered. The boy's energy, his hunger to learn, reminded Matthew of a younger version of himself, before ambition had been buried beneath boardrooms and stock options. One golden evening, as the sun dipped low behind the trees, the renovation was nearly complete. Elijah and his mother stood on their new porch, taking it all in. She turned to Matthew, her eyes brimming with emotion. "This isn't just a house anymore," she said, her voice catching. "It's a home. I don't know how we could ever thank you." Matthew smiled softly. "You already have. You reminded me of what life is supposed to be about. Family, connection, purpose. I think I'm the one who owes you thanks." The final day of the project felt more like a celebration than a construction wrap-up. Neighbors stopped by to admire the changes, bringing small gifts. Fresh bread, jars of jam, even a potted plant. Laughter rang through the yard as Elijah dashed around, showing off the new swing set, the painted walls, the polished kitchen. The house, once tired and weary, now radiated with warmth and life. Matthew stood on the new porch, leaning against the sturdy railing, sipping iced tea Elijah's mother had handed him moments before. "You've done more than fix a house," she said gently. "You've given us hope, and I think maybe you found something too." Matthew nodded. "I have," he admitted. "I spent years chasing all the wrong things. Money, titles, recognition. But none of it felt like this. Nothing ever filled me the way this has." As the sun began to set, Elijah joined them, still brimming with energy. He looked up at Matthew, something weighing on his mind. "Mr. Matthew," he said, "I've been thinking about everything you did for us. I want to do something like that one day. I want to help people too. Matthew placed a steady hand on the boy's shoulder, his voice calm and full of conviction. You already are, Elijah. Your kindness started all of this. Don't ever lose that. The three of them sat together on the porch, watching the sky shift from gold to deep orange. The warmth of the day lingered, but what stayed even more was the quiet joy of connection, a joy that had nothing to do with wealth and everything to do with heart. When it was time for Matthew to leave, Elijah and his mother walked him to his car. Her smile was tearful but radiant. Elijah's grin was wide, unrestrained, and unforgettable. As Matthew pulled away, their faces stayed with him, etched into memory, not as a farewell, but as a promise. In the weeks that followed, the story didn't end. It grew. Elijah's curiosity about construction turned into a real passion. Matthew arranged for him to spend time shadowing the renovation crew, who were more than happy to teach the eager young boy. Elijah soaked up every lesson, notebook in hand, his questions never ending, and Matthew kept coming back, again and again. Each visit felt less like an errand and more like a return home. He no longer felt like an outsider. He was part of their story now. And for the first time in a very long time, Matthew was truly content. The story ended the way it had begun, in a small town with a big heart, a place where one boy's simple act of kindness reminded a weary man of the most important truth. It's not about what you have, it's about what you give.